At my sister's engagement dinner, everyone was seated before I arrived. That part wasn't an accident. I was refilling a tray of champagne flutes when I understood exactly what my place was. Not at the table, not among the guests, not in the family photo that was already being framed in my mother's mind. I was background. The engagement party had reached that warm, curated moment people later described as effortless. Soft jazz floated from hidden speakers. String lights traced the backyard fence in perfect symmetry. The air smelled like citrus peel and money. My sister Natalie stood near the center of it all, one hand resting on her fiancé's arm, her ring catching light with every movement like it was alive. I stood a few steps behind the hired caterers, holding a silver tray I didn't recognize as mine. Just help for a bit, Natalie had said earlier, pressing the tray into my hands as if it were natural. They're short-staffed, and you're already dressed neutral. Neutral black button-down. No jacket, no place card. My mother had nodded immediately. You don't mind, right? You're so good at stepping in. My father hadn't said anything. He rarely did when silence worked in his favor. I moved through the crowd carefully, offering drinks. People smiled without really seeing me. One woman thanked me and asked if the bar had a non-alcoholic option. A man handed me his empty flute and told me I was doing a great job. I didn't correct them. It felt easier not to. I'd arrived alone, parked on the street because the driveway was reserved for family and VIP guests. The sign had been handwritten. I recognized my sister's handwriting immediately. Precise, decorative, final. Inside the yard, everything had a place, except me. When I glanced toward the long table near the center white linens, name cards angled just right, I noticed something small and sharp. My name wasn't there. There were names of friends Natalie had met after moving back from Chicago, her Pilates instructor, a coworker she once complained about for weeks. I stood with a tray, while they sat with linen, napkins folded like permission. At one point, I drifted close enough to hear my mother talking. Natalie just has such an eye for detail, she said proudly. She's always known how to put things together. I wondered what she thought this moment said about her design. Natalie spotted me then. Our eyes met briefly. She smiled, the kind of smile she used when she wanted the world to think everything was under control. She lifted her glass slightly, as if acknowledging a server. Then she turned away. That was when the humiliation settled in, not like a slap, but like a coat you realize you've been wearing all evening without choosing. I passed by my father. He didn't take a drink. He leaned in slightly and said, "You don't have to hover." Before I could answer, Natalie's voice cut in smoothly. "He offered," she said, "didn't you?" I didn't contradict her. The music shifted. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. Speeches were starting. Natalie stepped forward, radiant, practiced. She thanked everyone. Thanked her fiancé's parents. Thanked our parents. Thanked the planners, the caterers, the friends who showed up. Then, her eyes flicked toward me. "And thanks to everyone who helped tonight," she added, lightly. Even behind the scenes, there was polite applause. My mother clapped enthusiastically. My father smiled. No one questioned why her brother was standing near the bar instead of sitting beside them. I felt something shift then. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter and heavier. Recognition. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't stress. It wasn't her being thoughtless on a big day. This was deliberate. Designed. Executed with the same precision she used on everything else. I thought back to the years before. The times I'd stepped in when Natalie needed help. The loans I'd co-signed quietly. The weekends I'd spent fixing things at our parents' house while she sent apologetic texts from airports. The paperwork I'd handled because someone had to read the fine print. I'd always believed contribution earned belonging. Standing there with a tray of empty glasses, I realized how wrong I'd been. After the speeches, the party loosened again. People laughed louder. Someone spilled a drink. The band shifted tempo. Natalie approached me near the edge of the patio. "You can set that down now," she said. "We're good." I looked at her. Really looked. She seemed pleased. Calm. Unbothered. "Did you have a seat planned for me?" I asked. Her smile didn't fade, but something in her eyes hardened. "You're making this awkward," she said quietly. "Why do you always do that?" "I just asked a question." She exhaled through her nose. "Not everything is about you. It's one night." I nodded slowly. "Right," I said. She leaned closer, her voice low. "Don't sulk. People will notice." That was the point, I realized. She didn't want me gone. She wanted me diminished. Visible enough to serve, invisible enough not to matter. I handed the tray to one of the caterers. The woman took it with a brief, sympathetic glance. "You're done for the evening," Natalie said, already turning away. I didn't argue. I walked past the gift table. Neatly stacked boxes, tags facing outward. Everything curated for the photo that would be posted later, with a caption about love and gratitude. I didn't add anything. Near the driveway, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Where did you go?" I didn't answer. I paused once, looking back at the lights strung across the yard. From the outside, it looked perfect. The kind of night people envied. From where I stood, it looked instructional. I got into my car and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the muted sounds of celebration fade as the door closed. As I pulled away, a thought surfaced, uninvited but steady. A file folder at home. Documents I'd reviewed years ago when helping my parents restructure some assets. Something Natalie had waved away as boring adult stuff at the time. I hadn't kept it out of spite. I'd kept it because I was thorough. Driving away from my sister's engagement party, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to name before. Silence isn't harmless. It teaches people how to treat you. And tonight, my sister had taught me exactly what she thought my role was. What she didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that some roles come with leverage. And some details don't disappear just because no one bothers to look at them. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. It had been doing that for a while. Missed calls, messages, the familiar pattern of concern that wasn't really concern, just discomfort searching for a place to land. I didn't reach for the phone immediately. I lay still, listening to the quiet of my apartment, letting the noise stay contained where it belonged. When I finally looked, the messages arranged themselves into a story I already knew. My mother first. "You left without saying goodbye. People noticed. You embarrassed your sister." My father followed. Later, shorter. "Call me." Then Natalie. "I don't know why you do this. It was supposed to be a happy night. You always make yourself the victim." I set the phone face down and made coffee. The morning light fell across the kitchen counter, catching dust I hadn't noticed before. I wiped it away slowly. There was no rush. Whatever urgency they felt wasn't mine to absorb. By mid-morning, the tone shifted. "Natalie again. Mom's upset. You could have just played along. We're family." That word had always been flexible in her mouth. Family. When she needed patience. Overreacting when I needed fairness. I replied once. I did play along. All night. There was no immediate response. I spent the rest of the day doing ordinary things. Laundry, emails, errands. The kind of routine that steadies you when other people are trying to tilt the ground. Every so often, my phone buzzed. I let it. That evening, my parents came by unannounced. I hadn't invited them. They hadn't asked. That, too, was familiar. My mother took in the apartment with quick, assessing glances. My father stood near the door, hands in his pockets, like he might leave at any moment if this turned uncomfortable. "You hurt your sister," my mother said finally, sitting down without waiting to be offered a chair. I didn't answer right away. I poured water into 3 glasses and set them on the table. "I left early," I said. "That's all." "You made a scene by leaving," she insisted. "People talk." I nodded. "They usually do." My father cleared his throat. Natalie felt blindsided. That almost made me smile. "I was asked to serve drinks," I said calmly. "Was that a surprise to anyone?" My mother waved a hand. "It wasn't like that. She just needed help." "I've helped my whole life," I replied. This time, it was visible. Silence followed. Not the thoughtful kind. The strategic kind. My mother leaned forward. "Why are you being difficult now?" Of all times, there it was. Timing. As if dignity were rude when it didn't arrive on schedule. "I'm not being difficult," I said. "I'm paying attention." They exchanged a look. I'd seen it before, shared frustration. Unspoken agreement that I was once again stepping out of line. My father spoke carefully. "Natalie is under a lot of stress. There's the wedding, the house, the future plans. The house." That word didn't echo. It settled. "I handled some of the paperwork for that," I said, lightly. My mother stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Years ago. It's done." "Yes," I agreed. "It's done." That seemed to unsettle her, more than contradiction would have. They didn't stay long after that. My mother left with a reminder to be the bigger person. My father paused at the door and said, "Just smooth this over." I closed the door gently behind them. That night, I pulled the folder from the bottom drawer of my desk. It wasn't labeled dramatically, just dates, notes, copies. I spread the contents out slowly, as if I were seeing them for the first time. Years ago, when my parents were restructuring assets, trying to protect themselves from potential liabilities, they'd asked me to help. Natalie was busy then. building her career, living her life. I was local, reliable, detail-oriented, so I handled it. I read every clause, asked every question, made sure nothing was left vague. At the time, it felt responsible, necessary. One clause in particular had stood out to me even then. A contingency tied to ownership, activation dependent on a specific event, and formal disclosure. My parents had signed it without much interest. Natalie hadn't been present. Later, she'd told people I liked paperwork. I closed the folder and put it back. Over the next week, the messages intensified. Natalie accused me of resentment. My mother accused me of selfishness. My father accused me of stubbornness by implication, which was his specialty. No one asked why I'd been placed where I was. They asked why I couldn't just accept it. I declined invitations. I stopped responding to group messages. I went quiet in a way that made them louder. Then came the call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the lawyer. He introduced himself politely, formally. He said my name with care. I was reviewing some documents related to your family's property arrangements, he said. Your sister requested clarification ahead of the wedding. I listened. There's a clause, he continued, that requires acknowledgement during a formal family gathering, once an engagement is announced. I said nothing. I wanted to confirm your availability, he said. You're listed as a necessary party. Necessary. That word felt different. Yes, I said. I'm available. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the wall opposite my desk, not imagining outcomes, not rehearsing conversations, just breathing. The engagement party had been rehearsal enough. A few days later, Natalie called. Her voice was tight, polite in the way people get when they're trying not to sound worried. The lawyer mentioned you, she said. Do you know what that's about? I handled some of the earlier documentation, I replied. He probably has questions. She paused. You should have told me. You didn't ask, I said. Another pause. Are you coming to the family dinner on Sunday? She asked. Yes, I said. If I'm needed. After the call ended, I looked around my apartment again. The quiet hadn't changed. But something else had. For the first time, I wasn't bracing. I wasn't preparing to explain myself, or soften edges, or make things easier for people who found my existence inconvenient. I was simply waiting. Sunday would be public, formal, documented, and for once, I wouldn't be the one holding the tray. I folded the folder neatly and placed it on my desk, within reach. Some truths don't need to be argued. They only need to be read aloud. The dinner was scheduled for 7. By 6:55, everyone was already seated. The restaurant was the kind my parents chose when they wanted things to feel important without appearing extravagant private room. Neutral decor, menus thick with options no one really read. A place that respected hierarchy. A place where voices carried. Natalie sat at the center of the table beside her fiancé, her hand resting lightly on his forearm, the ring catching the overhead light the way it always did. My mother sat to her right, posture perfect. My father sat across from them, already holding his glass as if it were an anchor. My seat was at the far end, not in the hallway this time, but close enough to the edge to feel intentional. I took it without comment. Conversations overlapped. Wedding plans, guest lists, venues. My mother's voice moved easily through the room, filling pauses before anyone else could. Natalie laughed at the right moments, confident again. She looked relieved. I ordered water. No one asked why. At 7:10, the door opened quietly. The lawyer entered without drama. No briefcase snapping open. No announcement. Just a polite nod to the table and a calm introduction. Thank you for making time, he said. I'll be brief. Natalie's smile faltered just slightly. My mother straightened. This is really necessary, Natalie asked lightly. Can't we just handle this later? The lawyer smiled, professional and neutral. The clause requires a formal family setting following an engagement announcement. He placed a thin folder on the table. No one touched it. My father frowned. I don't remember anything urgent. You wouldn't, the lawyer replied. You delegated most of the review. His eyes shifted to me. I didn't look away. Natalie laughed softly. This is probably nothing. My brother always liked paperwork. There it was again. Diminishment disguised as familiarity. The lawyer opened the folder. This concerns the property transferred into the family trust 8 years ago, he said. Specifically, the contingency clause regarding ownership activation. My mother's fingers tightened around her napkin. Natalie's fiancé leaned forward, suddenly attentive. The lawyer continued, voice steady. The clause states that upon the engagement of one sibling, All beneficiaries must be formally notified of the trust's structure and conditions. He paused. One of those conditions involves primary stewardship. Silence settled over the table, not awkward, not explosive, focused. Primary stewardship was assigned to the sibling, who assumed financial and administrative responsibility during the restructuring period, he said. That designation was signed, notarized, and filed. He slid a document forward toward me. I didn't reach for it immediately. Natalie stared. That can't be right. The lawyer inclined his head. It is. The documentation is clear. My father spoke. Slowly. We always intended for the house to go to Natalie. Intent wasn't the deciding factor, the lawyer said. Execution was. My mother's voice sharpened. Why are we hearing about this now? Because the clause requires disclosure at this stage, he replied. And because your son was listed as the steward. Natalie turned to me. You knew about this? Yes, I said. That's it, she demanded. That's all you have to say. I met her gaze. I didn't raise my voice. I handled what I was asked to handle, I said, and I kept the records. Her fiancé shifted in his seat. What does this mean, exactly? The lawyer answered before anyone else could. It means that any transfer, sale, or representation of ownership requires his authorization. Natalie's face flushed. This is ridiculous. I haven't, I said. She stopped. The lawyer continued. The clause also includes a provision for public acknowledgement of stewardship. That's why this meeting was requested. He looked at Natalie. You should have been informed earlier. My mother shook her head. This is a misunderstanding. No, the lawyer said gently. It's a structure. I watched them absorb it, not the loss, but the shift. The realization that the role they'd assigned me, the quiet one, the helper, the background presence, had never been as small as they'd assumed. Natalie turned to me again. Her voice dropped. Why didn't you tell me? I considered the question. You didn't ask me to sit down at your engagement party, I said. You asked me to serve. The room went still. I wasn't accusing. I wasn't angry. I was stating a sequence. The lawyer cleared his throat. Going forward, any decisions regarding the property will require joint review. He closed the folder. That's all. He stood, nodded once, and left the room as quietly as he'd entered. No one spoke for several seconds. My father looked at the table. My mother stared straight ahead. Natalie's fiancé studied his hands. Natalie broke the silence. So what now? I took a breath. Not to steady myself, just to mark the moment. Now, I said, things are accurate. She searched my face for something: triumph, bitterness, satisfaction. There was none. The waiter arrived then, hesitant, sensing the shift. Menus were opened again, though no one seemed hungry. Conversation resumed, thinner now. Careful. I finished my water. I didn't order anything else. When the check came, my father reached for it, out of habit, then hesitated. I stood. I have an early morning, I said. Thank you for dinner. No one stopped me. Outside, the air was cool. The city moved on, unaware, unconcerned. Cars passed. Voices drifted from nearby tables. I walked to my car and sat for a moment before starting it. I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. For years, I'd mistaken restraint for weakness. They had to. Tonight, nothing dramatic had happened. No shouting, no accusations, no scene. Just facts. Read aloud. As I drove home, I thought of the engagement party, the tray, the lights, the careful exclusion. How small it had made me feel at the time. I understood now that it hadn't been smallness. It had been patience. And patience, when paired with clarity, has a way of rearranging rooms without ever raising its voice. When I got home, I placed the folder back in the drawer. Not hidden, not displayed, just where it belonged. Some things don't need to be held up to prove their weight. They simply need to exist. And for the first time, that was enough. I didn't walk away from that dinner feeling victorious. There was no rush of relief, no sudden lightness, no moment where everything felt resolved in the way stories sometimes pretend it does. Real endings aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They settle in slowly, like weight redistributing itself after you finally put something down. For years, I had been carrying more than my share without naming it. I told myself it was responsibility, maturity, family obligation. I learned later that those words are often used to disguise imbalance. When one person is always expected to adapt, absorb, and adjust, it stops being generosity. It becomes convenience. That night didn't change my family. It clarified them. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. There were no dramatic confrontations, no emotional speeches, No apologies carefully worded to protect pride. There were just pauses. Longer phone calls that ended sooner than they used to. Invitations that became optional instead of assumed. Accuracy has a way of doing that. People speak differently when they realize you're no longer guessing your place. Natalie never brought up the documents again. She didn't need to. The shift was visible in the way she measured her words now, the way she checked before speaking over me, the way she stopped assuming my availability was automatic. She hadn't become kinder. She'd become cautious. My parents adjusted in their own way. My mother began asking instead of telling. Small things at first. Preferences, timing, whether I was free. My father listened more than he spoke, which for him was its own form of admission. Neither of them acknowledged the imbalance directly, but they no longer denied it either. That was the closest they would come to accountability. And I accepted that, because the truth is, closure doesn't always look like understanding. Sometimes it looks like distance that no longer hurts. I stopped filling in gaps that weren't mine. Stopped smoothing over discomfort that wasn't caused by me. Stopped translating silence into obligation. What surprised me most was how much lighter life felt without those invisible tasks. Not easier, just clearer. I didn't become harder. I became precise. There's a difference. Precision means knowing when to speak and when to let the moment speak for you. It means understanding that not every injustice requires a response, only the ones that cost you your dignity. It means recognizing that you don't hear explanations to people who never asked for your perspective in the first place. For a long time, I thought restraint was something you endured until you earned the right to be heard. I was wrong. Restraint is a choice. And when chosen intentionally, it becomes power. Looking back, the engagement party wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the point of exposure. The moment where everything that had been happening quietly was finally visible enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. Serving drinks wasn't the insult. Being expected to accept it was. That distinction matters. Because humiliation only works when you agree to carry it. The moment you stop internalizing it, it loses its grip. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inevitably. I've learned that families, like institutions, rely on roles staying fixed. The responsible one, the successful one, the difficult one, the background one. As long as everyone stays in character, things function, even if they aren't fair. The moment one person steps out of their assigned role, the entire structure has to adjust. That adjustment is uncomfortable and revealing. Since that night, I've become more careful with what I give and who receives it. Not out of bitterness, but out of respect for my own limits. I no longer confuse availability with loyalty, or silence with peace. And perhaps most importantly, I've stopped believing that being needed is the same as being valued. If you're re-listening to this, and something feels familiar, if you've ever been the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who holds things together while being treated as optional, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not invisible. You've been underestimated. There is a difference. Underestimation happens when people mistake your restraint for weakness, your patience for permission, your silence for lack of awareness. They assume you don't see what's happening, because it's convenient for them to believe that. You do see it. You always have, and one day, whether through timing, documentation, opportunity, or simply refusal, the truth aligns in a way that no longer requires your explanation. When that moment comes, you won't need to raise your voice. You won't need to prove your worth. You won't need to demand respect. You will already have it, because you stopped giving it away where it wasn't returned. The most powerful shifts in life don't announce themselves. They happen quietly, and then the world responds differently without ever admitting why. That's not revenge. That's alignment. And alignment has a way of lasting. I don't know how my sister will tell this story someday. I don't know which details she emphasize or omit. I don't need to. My version isn't louder, it's complete. Some endings don't close doors. They close chapters. And if this story stayed with you, not because of the drama, but because of the restraint, then you already understand what this channel is about. These aren't stories of shouting matches or instant payback. They're stories of timing, of patience, of quiet recalibration. Stories where dignity outlives humiliation. If you've lived something like this, you're not alone. And if you haven't yet, remember this moment. Because when your silence finally meets the truth, you won't need to say a word, and neither will they.